You run a company, you lead teams, hit targets, and solve crises before anyone else even notices them. People call you dependable, unstoppable, focused. They see control, they see composure. What they don't see is what happens the moment the noise stops, the small, sudden panic that fills the silence. You can plan a quarter's roadmap but can't sit still through a quiet weekend. You can manage people's livelihoods but can't manage a Sunday afternoon without checking your email. For you, competence isn't freedom. It's armor. Before we go deeper, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to The Fictionist. It helps keep these psychological explorations alive, the stories beneath the surface of success. The high-functioning person doesn't look broken. That's part of the trap. On paper, everything is fine. They meet deadlines, deliver results, stay composed during crises. Their outer life works because their inner life has been engineered around control. Productivity becomes the ritual that holds chaos at bay. If they stop, they don't feel rest. They feel collapse, waiting, so they don't stop. This habit rarely starts in adulthood. It's learned early. Somewhere in the past, often in childhood, silence wasn't safety. It was when criticism came or when love was withdrawn. Maybe achievement earned attention. Maybe stillness invited guilt. So the person learned to build safety out of motion. Grades became the proof of worth, success the substitute for affection. The lesson stuck. You are only as good as what you produce. By the time this person grows up, the mechanism has turned automatic. They call it work ethic or drive, but underneath, it's avoidance. Every finished project and every packed schedule is another wall built against feeling. The fear is simple but powerful. If they stop moving, everything they've kept buried will surface. So they fill the day, the calendar, and the mind. Rest isn't a reward, it's a threat. Picture it. Someone who leads a company, answers messages before dawn, organizes every minute. They tell themselves it's efficiency, but what they're really managing is anxiety. The empty space between tasks feels dangerous, so they remove it. Even vacations become projects, structured, optimized, timed. They come home more tired than when they left. The body tries to send warnings: insomnia, irritability, a racing mind that won't switch off. Yet those signals are reinterpreted as problems to solve. Instead of rest, they double down: new routines, new tools, new metrics. The defense mechanism strengthens itself. Productivity becomes identity. Psychologically, this is called a compensatory defense. It's a pattern where action replaces emotion. The brain learns that doing something, anything, feels safer than feeling something. When the person achieves, they momentarily escape the discomfort underneath, the fear of inadequacy, of being unneeded, of losing control. Each success resets the clock. The relief lasts minutes, then fades. The next goal appears instantly because without it, the system collapses. This is why the high-functioning often say they can't relax even when they want to. The nervous system no longer recognizes rest as safety. When they try to slow down, anxiety rises instead of calm. Their body interprets stillness as exposure. The mind, trained to equate worth with motion, rushes to fill the void with tasks. Relaxation becomes another performance. They schedule it, measure it, try to win at it. Underneath this constant doing lies an unacknowledged despair. It's not loud, it's quiet, polite, efficient despair. The despair of someone who has done everything right and still feels nothing. They tell themselves they're tired, not empty. They call it burnout because burnout sounds temporary. But it's not just exhaustion, it's identity fatigue. They've spent so long being the reliable one that they no longer know who they are without the role. In therapy, this shows up as resistance to vulnerability. The high-functioning client talks about logistics, not feelings. They describe patterns like reports. I've been overworked, I just need to optimize my time. The language of emotion is replaced by the language of management. They seek fixes, not understanding, because understanding might slow them down. The irony is that their control works. It does what it was designed to do. It keeps life organized and predictable, but it also builds a cage. They don't crash dramatically, they decay quietly. Joy becomes indistinguishable from relief. Achievements register as temporary escapes, not genuine fulfillment. Even moments of success carry the aftertaste of dread. Now that it's done, what next? There's a psychological concept called functional anxiety. It describes a person who channels fear into productivity. It looks impressive from the outside, but it's powered by tension, not motivation. Every unchecked box on the to-do list feels like a potential failure. Every delay threatens the fragile equilibrium that keeps the panic contained. The person learns to live in constant anticipation, mistaking hypervigilance for focus. At some point, the body rebels. The high-functioning begin to experience physical symptoms that no amount of planning can manage: fatigue, numbness, digestive problems, migraines. These aren't random, they're the cost of perpetual activation. The nervous system was never designed to stay in performance mode forever. But stopping feels like death, so they keep going, layering new habits over old fear. What makes this despair silent is its camouflage. Society rewards productivity. The high-functioning are praised for being reliable, composed, driven. They are rarely told to stop. Their pain is invisible because it looks like success. When they finally do break down, people around them are shocked. "You seemed fine," they say. "You had everything together." But inside, the collapse had been building for years. To see how deep this goes, imagine a simple scene: a successful executive alone on a Saturday morning. The week is over. There's no meeting, no deadline, no client waiting. They make coffee, sit down and feel something rising, a kind of emptiness they can't name. Within minutes, they open their laptop, check emails, scroll through spreadsheets. The relief is immediate. They've escaped themselves again. The machine keeps turning. This cycle isn't about ambition, it's about fear. The fear that stillness will expose what achievement hides. Many high-functioning individuals were once the responsible child, the fixer, the one who couldn't afford to fall apart. They learned to translate anxiety into action because it was the only form of safety available. Now, as adults, that strategy is mistaken for personality. People call them strong. They call themselves disciplined. But beneath both words lies the same truth. They never stopped running. The tragedy is that they don't know what rest feels like. When they try, they feel guilt or panic. They interpret the absence of motion as the presence of danger. Their nervous system fires alarms in moments that should bring peace. Silence becomes confrontation. Time alone becomes a mirror they can't face. In psychological terms, productivity here functions as a defense against affect. It, as the mind's way of protecting itself from emotional pain by converting feeling into doing. It's efficient but costly. Over time, the person loses emotional range. They can manage crises but can't enjoy calm. They can plan decades ahead, but can it sit through a quiet evening without picking up their phone? Breaking this pattern requires more than rest. It requires unlearning the idea that safety equals control. That's not easy for someone who built their entire identity on competence. It feels like disarming in enemy territory. Yet until that belief changes, every achievement will carry the same emptiness. When high-functioning people finally reach the edge, when the body collapses, or the mind stops cooperating, they often describe the same feeling: confusion. They don't understand why they can't keep going. They say, "I've always managed before." They don't realize that what they called resilience was often suppression. The silent despair of the high-functioning isn't loud or dramatic. It's the quiet exhaustion of people who can do everything except stop. It's the invisible panic that fills the spaces between meetings, the dread that hides under competence. And until they face what silence actually means, productivity will remain their armor, the polished surface that keeps the world impressed and the self unseen. The inability to relax isn't a sign of strength or drive, it is a sign of internal unrest. The high-functioning person lives in constant motion, not because they love productivity, but because they fear what will emerge when the noise stops. When they try to sit still, silence becomes hostile. The mind starts whispering things it has managed to avoid during meetings, deadlines, and endless notifications. It says things like, "You're falling behind," or "You're not doing enough," or worse, "What if all this effort doesn't mean anything?" To escape that confrontation, they reach for their phone, open their email, or start another project. They think they're avoiding laziness, but what they're really avoiding is themselves. This is the anxiety of the void, a psychological defense mechanism dressed up as discipline. It looks like ambition from the outside, but it's fueled by fear on the inside. The high-functioning person doesn't simply fear failure, they fear stillness, because stillness creates space, and space allows awareness. And awareness threatens the carefully built structure of self-worth tied to performance. The brain, conditioned by years of equating doing with being, interprets inactivity as danger. It floods the body with discomfort until action resumes. That's why they can lead a company, manage a crisis, or juggle responsibilities with flawless efficiency, but sitting alone in silence for 10 minutes feels unbearable. To understand this, picture the mind as a noisy factory that's been running non-stop for years. Every time the machines slow down, you can start to hear what's underneath, the creaks, the leaks, the structural weaknesses. The noise has become comforting because it drowns out those signs. That's what happens in the high-functioning mind. The noise of work covers the noise of emotion. Silence exposes it. The anxiety that appears in those quiet moments isn't new. It is the backlog of thoughts and feelings that have been suppressed under layers of productivity. This is also why rest doesn't feel restful. Many high-functioning individuals report that vacations, weekends, or even short breaks make them uneasy. The absence of structure removes their coping mechanism. They start to feel the weight of emotions they've kept locked away: guilt, inadequacy, loneliness, or the creeping suspicion that their achievements haven't really made them happy. They mistake these sensations for restlessness or boredom, so they return to what they know best: work, problem-solving, or planning. They tell themselves they're just bad at relaxing, when in truth they're running from emotional noise that silence makes impossible to ignore. The irony is that the high-functioning person is often admired for their control. They look stable, composed, reliable, but inside their mind is a battlefield between control and collapse. Their competence is the armor that keeps chaos at bay. They rely on external order, calendars, goals, routines, to manage internal disorder. When those systems pause, the inner disorder surfaces. That's why even a single unstructured hour can feel suffocating. Their nervous system has been trained to associate productivity with safety and stillness with threat. A useful way to see this is through the concept of psychological homeostasis. The human mind, like the body, seeks balance. But when that balance is built around constant doing, stopping becomes a shock to the system. The brain interprets stillness as withdrawal. The chemicals that once surged during tasks, dopamine from progress, cortisol from urgency, adrenaline from deadlines, suddenly drop. The absence of those neurochemical highs feels like emptiness. It's not that the person can't rest, it's that rest feels wrong. Their baseline has shifted so far toward stimulation that calm registers as discomfort. Think of a CEO who's used to running 12-hour days. When they finally take a weekend off, they can't relax by the pool without checking their phone. The urge isn't rational, it's biological. Their brain has become addicted to the rhythm of constant input and output. Dopamine patterns reward action. Each completed task releases a small chemical hit of satisfaction, reinforcing the behavior. Over years, this becomes the only way the mind knows how to regulate itself. Silence doesn't provide that hit, so it triggers withdrawal instead. On a psychological level, this pattern is a form of avoidance. Work and busyness serve as distractions from internal conflict. The high-functioning person may be running from self-doubt, grief, or a fear of insignificance. But because they've learned to translate those emotions into performance, they appear successful rather than distressed. The world rewards them for their avoidance. Promotions, praise, and admiration act as external proof that their way of living works. But underneath, their nervous system is in a constant state of low-grade tension, waiting for the next task to justify their existence. You can see this dynamic clearly in how they talk about downtime. They say things like, "I'll relax when the work is done, but the work is never done." Or, "I just like being productive," but their version of productivity leaves no room for rest. When they do try to rest, they often choose activities that mimic work. Organizing, planning, or learning something new. Even their leisure becomes performance. The gym becomes a metric. Reading becomes research. Meditation becomes another goal to optimize. It's not relaxation, it's disguised labor. This cycle continues until burnout forces a confrontation. Eventually, the body rebels. Sleep disorders, fatigue, irritability, or sudden emotional outbursts start to appear. The mind that has avoided silence now finds it imposed. When burnout hits, the stillness they once feared becomes inescapable. And that S, when the anxiety of the void reveals its core truth. It was never about productivity, it was about pain. The person wasn't afraid of slowing down, they were afraid of what they might find when they did. From an analytical standpoint, this behavior fits into a pattern known in clinical psychology as compensatory hyperfunctioning. It's a strategy where individuals compensate for deep-seated insecurity by excelling in external domains. They maintain control over their environment to avoid feeling powerless internally. It's a strategy that works brilliantly until it doesn't. Because while you can control a company, you can't control your own subconscious indefinitely. The suppressed material eventually demands attention, and it usually does so in moments of forced quiet. For example, imagine a founder who's built their life around non-stop achievement. Every day is filled with meetings, decisions, and responsibilities. They thrive under pressure because pressure leaves no room for introspection. But then, one evening, after everyone has gone home, they sit in their office in silence. There's no sound except the hum of the air conditioner. For the first time, there's nothing urgent to do, and suddenly, their chest feels heavy. The thoughts come uninvited. What am I doing all this for? Why don't I feel proud? Why do I still feel empty? That's the anxiety of the void breaking through. As not a lack of purpose, it is the mind finally confronting what has been buried under years of motion. The solution isn't to stop working, it's to learn to coexist with silence. That requires retraining the nervous system to tolerate stillness without panic. At first, this feels impossible. The mind rebels, the body twitches, and the urge to act returns. But with practice, the silence becomes less threatening. The high-functioning individual begins to see that what they feared wasn't the void itself, but what it revealed: vulnerability, self-doubt, and unmet emotional needs. Once those are acknowledged, stillness becomes less of a threat and more of a space for healing. The irony is that the capacity to rest is a deeper form of strength than the ability to perform. Relaxation requires trust. Trust in yourself, trust in time, trust that you have value even when you're not producing. The anxiety of the void destroys that trust. It convinces you that meaning exists only in motion. But the truth is, motion without reflection eventually turns into escape. and escape, no matter how productive, is still running. For high-functioning individuals, learning to sit in silence for 10 minutes can feel more difficult than running an entire company. But that discomfort isn't weakness, it's withdrawal from a lifetime of avoidance. It's what happens when the noise fades and the truth begins to surface. That's not failure, that's the beginning of actual rest. If this kind of analysis resonates with you, if you've ever found yourself afraid of your own quiet moments, then you are exactly who we speak to. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to The Fictionist for more explorations of the psychology behind the stories we live, the masks we wear, and the minds we hide from ourselves.